Good morning, podcast, and welcome to the Pierre T. Lambert Show. You are on the first episode of 2020, so let me wish you all the best for this year. I hope all your projects will go through and that you will have a blast through it. Remember, the process is the most important part. Now, with that being said, we're going to start this year with an amazing podcast that I've been waiting for a very long time. I finally made it happen. We finally made it happen. It took two. My guest today is Chelsea Yamase. You might know her as Chelsea Kauai on Instagram. I've come to discover Chelsea's work while I was on the world tour with my wife, and we always felt there was a huge authenticity in whatever she was sharing. It was not only visually attractive with beautiful photos, but also the message behind it was strong and impactful. That is exactly why I wanted her to come on this podcast, share her story, and share how she got started in life. Chelsea is not only a photographer, a model, a visual artist, she's also an adventurer that travels around the world. She literally inspires us and makes us discover new places to explore. And most importantly, she encourages us to experience the outdoor, experience nature. So this episode is going to be packed with value, and at any point, if something resonates with you, please tweet us, Instagram us, and let us know in the comments or anywhere possible how you're feeling, what is the most impactful part of that conversation, because we're going to be talking about her story. How did she actually leave her long-time dream of becoming an architect to lean into something that was unknown, uncertain, and had no direction at the beginning? How did she actually get to where she is today? What were the struggles? How did she overcome those? That is a part that will really speak to a lot of you, in my opinion. And then we're going to be talking about creativity. Where does she find creativity? How does she uses it? And how does being more vulnerable and sharing how you really feel with the rest of the world actually helped her in her career and in her community? Long story short, this is a dope conversation. I think you will love it. I suck at intros. Let's get started. Let's welcome Chelsea to the podcast. Welcome to the podcast, Chelsea.
I'm so excited to be here. I'm so happy that it finally worked out.
I know, right? First, before we start anything, I really want to thank you for taking you the time. That's the only thing we cannot buy in life. So thank you so much. And I kind of wanted to share with you that I was actually checking my notes that I take for our podcast. And I realized I had a list of guests I wanted from October 2018. And I wrote down Chelsea after a bunch of other cool people. And I wrote Chelsea, parentheses, wrote it in the comment, asked in the comments. And so now, I just discovered it. So a year and a half later, this is happening.
I love that. And that just so speaks to the power of perseverance and to always asking, and I really appreciated how I know you've asked me a few times, and I actually told you, I was like, I just don't feel like I'm ready, or I was kind of thinking about starting my own podcast, and you were so willing to, help me through that journey and stuff. And then you finally asked, what was it, a few days ago, one more time. And I was like, you know what? That sounds fun. Let's do it. So yeah, as a message to everyone out there, just, it's putting in that time and perseverance, and you never know when you're going to get the yes. So I'm happy. I'm so stoked to be here.
Well, on that topic, it's a little difficult because, and maybe you can share your experience and you can be honest, I don't care. There is always a point where I'm like, is it too pushy to ask again, or is it normal?
Oh, that's a really good question. And I think part of it is the way that you approach it. Yours have always felt very much that it wasn't something that you felt I was obligated to do. You said, hey, this is something that I do that I'm really passionate about. I would love to have you. But those requests were made months, if not, years apart. And so it kind of gave that space and time for growth, and for it to not feel like an imposition, or to not feel, just kind of overly aggressive. I think if someone's sending, multiple DM requests all in the span of 1 week, or quite a few emails, and it's just gauging that process and knowing that, it does sometimes take weeks, months, years for these things to align and to feel good for everyone. So yeah, I guess you just have to kind of be mindful of that. And that's a really good question.
Yeah, I imagine you must have a lot of DMs and a lot of them must be requests. So I appreciate your answer. It does tell that it's okay to ask, I guess, if you space it out or make it not pushy. on that note, a lot of people I know try to get either to me or to other people, and they ask questions right away. And I feel like, and that's something that I try to be mindful with others, especially like, for example, you or people with like very big audiences like you do. It's I know, having like a Nate of that audience, how it feels already to have those requests. So I'm like, how can you make it so that it's actually an enjoyable, almost enjoyable experience for the other?
Yeah, completely. Yeah, so you kind of know how it is, and I think it's also taught me to just be, like how they say the power of no, but how to do that in a way that is really honest and really truthful and really compassionate. And I used to think I had to kind of make a bunch of excuses, or that, it just didn't feel right to tell this person I'm busy, because really busy is just a reflection of our priorities, right? So it's never that you don't have time. Everyone has time for things that they care about. And finding ways to express that, like, hey, this thing that you're asking of me just isn't in alignment with my top priorities right now, and maybe here's another resource, or here's a person that could help you, or just a plain like, I'm really sorry, I just can't commit to that. And learning to try to do that in the best way possible, and it's really freed me up to pursue and to put time into those things that I actually truly care about. And I find that people in general are just really they appreciate like that candor, and that you're not just kind of giving them some weird paltry excuse that doesn't feel quite right. You're just being honest, like, it's just not for me right now. And that's, I think that's something that we can all get better at in our daily lives.
Yeah, definitely. And every time you take from one thing is taken from another, which you might enjoy more. Can we role reverse that one? Do you have throughout your career someone you try to reach out to, or a situation like that you would think of that really helped you in the looking after it?
Ooh, okay, off the top of my head, I'm gonna go with no, only because I haven't really done I hadn't done like a lot of outreach in terms of to bigger photographers or bigger social media influencers, because this was just such a path that I didn't expect, that I didn't even know that I like needed mentorship at the time. I didn't have one of those types of goals. It just kind of happened, and the things started rolling, and I had to just kind of find guidance along the way. I'd say the only time I made a list like that was actually when I was thinking about, okay, if I were to start a podcast, who would I want to have on as some of like my, top guests and things. And actually, one of them was Chase Jarvis, who runs like another creativity podcast. And it was crazy that the first podcast that I've ever been interviewed on was on his. And I said yes to his podcast not too long ago. So yeah, it was kind of like a weird full circle thing that happened for me.
That was awesome. I saw that in your stories. That's when I was like, oh, maybe I'll ask her again.
Yeah. You caught me at a good time. I was like, oh, podcasts are actually fun. Let's do this.
That's awesome. Chelsea, you just mentioned like that thing started rolling. Why don't you tell us a little bit maybe of your original story? Like what's volume 0 in your hero's journey? Where did you start on Earth?
Oh my gosh. Okay. So in this, narrative story arc, it's less of a beautiful hero's journey and more of a like very, very, very roundabout way of everything coming together, as is all, as are all things in life. But I really just laugh when I look back on my journey. It looks like a bowl of spaghetti. But it essentially, I always thought I was going to be an architect. That was my dream, and that was what I thought I was going to do. I got early accepted into architecture school. That was my entire life. And after a year, I basically realized it wasn't for me, and it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. And so, yeah, I went through quite a hard time for a few years of, working multiple jobs, doing different courses and classes and community college, and just kind of very much at a loss of what my life was going to look like. I knew certain things that I cared about. I was like, oh, you know, I really, really want to travel. And I really want to, you know, like I loved the arts. I loved graphic design. That was a big part of my life. But I just didn't see it. I just didn't see it as a viable option at that time. And it's like funny to think that now, but it really just didn't seem like an option for me. And so, yeah, I ended up doing quite a few different things, but eventually I was doing journalism school and also working as a graphic designer on the side. And that was right around the end of college. And it just so happened to be right around kind of that, you know, semi starting point of social media. And I was sharing different things about nature and the outdoors and just my life here in Hawaii. And yeah, it really all started when I started freediving. I had a friend that was getting into underwater photography. I was just getting into freediving, and I started sharing those images, and it was kind of like, whoa, now this has, you know, 500 people saw this. That's crazy. And 1,000 people. And I'll kind of never forget that moment where, yeah, I had, you know, like 1,000 likes on a photo, and I was like, this is so odd, you know, especially for a girl who comes from a really small island. Like, this island is tiny. It's like 25 miles wide, you know, and it was just, yeah, a very like strange feeling. And I never really expected anything from this, but it just sort of kept, yeah, it sort of kept growing from that point until I think it was about a year and a half later, where I was still working full time, but I kept taking all these, you know, breaks to do these photo shoots or to do little travel jobs and things. And I distinctly remember having a conversation with a girlfriend and saying, like, you know, like, I think, like, I just feel like I'm really dividing my time a lot, and it's really hard for me. Maybe I'm just gonna like try this social media thing for a little bit. And you know, she always reminds me of that conversation. She's like, imagine if you hadn't have done that. Like, you were so uncertain. And I was like, yeah, I know. That's just crazy to think I almost didn't do it, you know?
That's I want to get back to on a few points you just mentioned, because
For
I think
sure.
that's awesome how you got into it. And well, the first thing that really pops in my mind, and the reason that I kind of dig into the story, is because I think it gives context as to where you are now and who you are and what you share. Because it's so easy with social media, or even let's dump social media. Like, you take any book, any newspaper, you look at someone and you think you know everything about them just from that article, but what you miss out is the whole background story. That's why maybe you told it 1,000 times. I just like to give a little bit of context. And I picked up something you said when you had your dream of being an architect, and after, when you kind of not it crushed, but crashed, sorry, but you were saying that it didn't occur in your mind that art or that was even an option, or what you're doing now was even an option. Would you have any clue why? Was it because of the way you were raised, or the environment you're in, or why was it not an option for you?
I think for me, it was two things. So first of all, to give context, this was in like 2006, you know. I don't even think I was about to start, I want to say I had like an iPhone 3. Like, social media just like wasn't,
Yeah.
it wasn't present the way it is now in our daily lives. Media wasn't present in the way it is in our daily lives. And so, because I didn't, you know, we really need people to like model different life paths for us. I think it's very hard for us to kind of like imagine things outside of our normal sphere of thinking, or at least it was for me. And so, because this wasn't a life path that I had seen modeled for me in any type of, like, in any capacity, it was just like, didn't occur to me that like I could have something where I worked for myself and I traveled and I made money and I got to promote sustainability and talk about things that I care about. You know, I didn't know a single person who ran a podcast. I didn't know a single published author, you know, like it just,
Yeah.
it's just such a different, now I have a bookshelf of 15 books that are written by my friends. It's so much more accessible now than it was whatever that, you know, 10, 15 years ago, I guess, when I was in that stage of being a teenager and figuring out what the heck to do in my life. So I think just that, like that gap in my, in having examples around me was a big one. And also I came from just, my childhood was very much like, academic and, you know, the typical, like really like looking up to like math and kind of like these traditional paths, I suppose. And so it felt very just like inherently risky, I guess, or just it didn't seem advisable to be like, oh, to be a graphic designer or something of that nature seemed a little bit like, ooh, that seems scary, you know. I didn't really think of it. I so valued like high academic achievement and those things that it really kind of, in my own mind, I think just narrowed my realm of possibilities.
Got it. That makes sense, especially 2006. I feel like the world has changed so much in 15 years, not just ourselves, but if I look at smaller cousins or whatever, what they're exposed to and the options they get exposed to is immense. Back in, and maybe it's the same for you, but in France, we have a saying, it's like struggling artists, where like artists are starving basically. And so when I was raised, it was very similar, where it was like, get good grades, get a good job. If you want to be an engineer, be an engineer. Maybe you should be a doctor or whatever you want to be. And I remember one day having like a mind shift towards, actually I could do something else, but it was later. It was like 2014. It took me a while, yeah. But
no, it also
I remember
took me a while, and I had so much. I don't know if you experienced this, but I had so much, like, I don't know, like guilt and weird, almost like an embarrassment when I first started pursuing more things like photography and things that were creative, because in my friend group, like, not that they weren't supportive, but it was just sort of like, oh, like that's what you're gonna do with your life, like, huh? You know, it didn't seem like it mattered as much as, say, yeah, being an engineer, being a doctor, these other types of very well respected life paths. And that was really hard to kind of and to be proud of like the path that I've taken now. And like you said, it's changed so much even in the last 5 years that I really don't feel that way anymore. And it's quite normal to have a deeply creative life. But yeah, at that point, it was definitely a little bit of a struggle for me.
Yeah, I can imagine. That's awesome. I read somewhere, because I did what every great podcaster did, which means I Googled your name before. Just joking. But I did read somewhere that, and I did Google your name just to see. You were talking about a trip that you took to Europe.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering, was there a specific moment, for example, during that trip where you felt that you were changing completely direction, and you felt like you had a direction that you were going to lock in and go into? Because something that I feel a lot of, myself and included, and maybe other people, whether you're a photographer or just anyone in general, feel like every time you start taking a direction, you always have doubts as, is it a good one? And then you have more options. Do you remember, did you have a feeling at one point where you're like, I'm going to go in that direction and that one only?
No, I don't think I had that moment of clarity. Gosh, that would have been nice. And I think to this day, I don't think I've ever, I mean, I've felt that more. I've felt that more in alignment now. But no, at that point, I think it was almost the opposite, where I just kind of got to this point where I felt like super lost, for lack of a better term, and didn't know what I was going to do. And it almost was like hitting that bottom point and just like going, okay, well, I don't know. I love graphic design. I had always loved photography and cinematography. And I was like, I to this day I have no idea why. I just remember late night I was online going, well, wonder if I went to like, like Italy and did like design or something. And I just started looking up schools and I found one and I emailed them and they're like, oh, like the, admissions thing closes. And it was like that week or something. So yeah, it was almost more of a feeling totally lost and being willing to kind of like go out on a limb and just try something that I thought I might like. That was really what started propelling me in that direction. And then it was just, little pieces coming together after that.
That's awesome. I love how that works out, how life works out. It's really cool. Well, I want to we're gonna move into the photography and like your art and what you do today. But while I was meditating this morning, I had that funny thought that kept coming, because I was like, oh, maybe I have like questions coming up for the podcast. But one that was reflecting on, because I also had like a ton of video ideas dropping in my mind, and I was like, you know what, dare to dare. And I was like, oh, that sounds so stupid, but it's in a way what you're saying is almost identical, where it's like we have a very difficult time to dare because we don't dare daring, if that makes sense. It's like you're putting that constraint into like, no, I can't do that. But what if you could? Like, what would that look like? And then it's meaning it's like the first step into changing anything or imagining it something new. It's really giving yourself the liberty to even think about it. And I feel that so many people just block themselves from it.
Totally. Well, like we're taught to, we're not really taught how to like manage loss and manage failure or all of these kind of like really scary emotions. And so we like tend, I think, to play it very safe. And I'm only speaking from experience here because it's something I've done so many years of my life, where, I haven't kind of like you said, like dared enough in so many aspects of my life. And I guess I always thought going into it like, oh, like the way will be clear and that I'll like know what to do, or I'll feel ready. And like that point like never really happens, And I loved this quote. I don't know if you're familiar with Seth Godin, but he's an author that I really enjoy. Yeah. And I think he said something along the lines of like, if you don't feel like an imposter, you aren't working hard enough. And that,
yes, I remember that.
Yeah. And I was like, when I read that, I was like, oh, so like, this uncomfortable feeling that I'm always feeling, it's just because I'm pushing into the edge of what I'm hoping for and what I want to do in the world and what I want to create. And so, that is that feeling in my chest, but it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be a negative one. And those are the places where I think offer us like the most growth and the most transformation is when we're daring on those outer edges.
And I guess no one teaches you that because everyone's lost anyway.
It's just it's like that.
Your parents have nothing figured out when they have you in this form.
Exactly, and it's like that's okay, Like I think there's so much beauty in that, and there's so much beauty in like I have so many people that just come to me and they're like, I'm unhappy and I'm lost, or I'm such and such an age and I'm young, I'm old, whatever, and the universal thread through that is we're kind of like, I don't know, we're almost like waiting for someone to give us an answer or give us permission in some sense, and I just write people back. I'm like, you guys, I am figuring this out as I go too, there's no angel that descends from the creative heavens and tells you how to do this. So yeah, it's fun. We're all figuring it out. And those times that I think we feel the most pain or the most lost or the most whatever it is, like those are the gateway moments, because that's when you're willing to take a big risk, is when you feel like, it's not like when you're on top of the world, it's you just want to kind of keep everything the way it is. And it's when we're like searching and grasping and don't know what the heck to do. That is like your container is empty and you're ready to like receive all those new things in life. So I just try to tell people to be super excited about those moments that feel weird and uncomfortable.
Do you I started feeling that way I guess at one point in my life, but something changed everything for me when I started looking at my life like a book or like a movie, and every single one of those experiences, good or bad, define my story, define my book, makes the movie interesting. The guy who is currently depressing for 6 months, that time, that moment in his life is the most important, because it will define when he's 90. If he gets to 90, that's a moment he will remember as a turning point for something else, you know? And the moment I just switched that, it was very interesting. I have a lot of imagination in my brain. And I always said that Rick and Morty is like, for me, a fun show where I felt like someone connected his own imagination to some TV screen, and it just random shit appeared on it, and it just was fun to watch. And I was like, if I look at my life as a movie or as a story, I actually feel it's easier to go through it, because when it's hard, you just tell yourself, hey, that's the hard chapter. Let's see what we do with that one. What's going to happen to that character who is me, you know?
100%. That's such a good way to look at it. And I think that kind of ties into like almost the meditation or like mindfulness way of looking and being an observer of your thoughts and feelings versus being like, I am this thought, or I am this feeling, or I am this failure, or whatever it is. So that's like such a beautiful way of looking at it, as like a book or a movie. And it is, I think, I don't know how old you are. I think you know how old I am, but
I actually don't know.
So I'm 31. And
same. 87?
88.
Oh, okay. 87 for, oh yeah, oh God. Okay, so yeah, 87 here,
Does
88.
he know his own
nice.
age, folks? I don't know. No. But yeah, and I think that is one of the gifts of age and of time, is being able to look back at those chapters and moments in your life, and they just they make so much sense to me now. Like I look back on being ultra sad and depressed and lost in certain phases of my life, and feeling like an immense sense of shame over being like a college dropout leaving architecture school, or just so many different things, even heartbreaks or happy times, and they all just, you go, wow, they just all kind of make sense. And I don't understand how it works out this way, but it really does, especially if you can kind of just look at those and take the lessons from whatever it is teaching you. I think when we start to feel like we're going in circles, that's when we're just not quite learning and applying those lessons that are they're there to teach us.
I see. Do you have a recent, let's say, turning point, or like point where you felt like uneased with it, and you felt like it wasn't right, but you leaned into it? Is there any recent that you would share, and like just walk us through your process? I'm fairly curious.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's been so many. I think I'm constantly constantly a work in progress, but I'd say the most recent one was separating from my my boyfriend Sam, and we had dated for about 2 years. He's also a creative. We traveled extensively together. We were living together, and for various reasons felt that we needed to part ways, which was just like, we had made videos together and photos together and done all these things together. And I think a part of me was just like, it's obviously very uncomfortable and very like just immensely sad to go through that process of splitting with someone that you love. But I was at this point in my life where I really, really trust, like they say, like trust the process, and it's actually, just led to so many really cool, beautiful changes in my life, from really personal things like it actually prompted me to switch and to try being vegan. And now that's been like a really cool part of my journey in the last few months that I don't think would have happened if I didn't like lean into this, breakup. So that's kind of more on the personal side. I've gotten way more into mindfulness and meditation because I needed those tools for myself coming out of that experience, because it was very like heartbreaking. So I was like, okay, what are, how can I create some structure in my life so that I can really feel good? And now those are practices that I think will carry with me through the rest of my life. But on like a more, I guess, business level, since most of the people on here are probably photographers, I had an experience kind of more in the beginning of my career where I was traveling full time with a photographer friend of mine. And this was when, I wasn't as confident in my abilities with like photography and videography. And in my head, like he was kind of the creative and I was just sort of there. And so when it came time that like our businesses were going in separate directions and we and our friendship was going in a different direction, I was so scared that I wouldn't be able to create on my own. Like I felt, even though like I already knew how to use a camera, I knew how to edit, different things, I just felt very dependent on this partnership and on this on this collaboration. And so in that separation, I really had to step into my own in terms of business, in terms of owning my creativity, in terms of owning my vision and being able to translate that to other people, and not feeling like I wasn't capable of doing that, of taking my own photos, editing them myself, doing all these steps that I really had always been doing, but I didn't, I was giving away so much of my creative power at that point and I didn't realize it. And so, so that was a really interesting learning point where I was like, I was so scared to stop that business partnership. And I thought, oh my gosh, like, my, like the quality of my work is just going to go way down and I'm not going to be able to like do this thing. And I'm going to have to find someone to like replace him and my mind's going 1,000 miles an hour. And then to take that step back and say, okay, well, no, like I am capable of doing this. These aren't skills that I either learn or don't already have. And so why do I not feel confident in my ability to do it myself, So that was a really, really important.
What gave you that confidence? Like what was the trigger that made you think I can do this?
I think part of it was just like necessity. And they say confidence is born through action, basically. And so because I was already in this place where I had to be, putting out certain types of content and doing, different photo shoots. And oh my gosh, yeah, I was like, I did my first commercial shoot for Lambert by myself. And I just remembered like scrambling in the week before that. I was like trying to find anyone to come on this job with me. I was like, please just someone come with me. Like, I'm just so scared to do this on my own. And it was just one of those things where like no one could come. It was last minute. And I had to just step into that place and be like, okay, like I'm just going to have to try to do this. And then through that process of doing, basically came out the other side being just that much, a little bit more confident until I realized, for me fairly quickly, like, oh, okay, like I'm not going to be perfect at this. I'm not going to be the, like the best overnight, but like I am capable to a certain extent and I'm capable of learning. So that was really, I think, a gift in disguise of forcing me to grow, because I don't think I ever would have done it on my own. I was just too timid,
That's amazing. Not.
Well, it was the world.
I mean, it's amazing.
I think, right? It was like they're shaking me. They're like, "You can do this. You just don't know it yet." And I was like, "I'm scared. I don't want to." And I just like, and then they're like, "Well, you're going to." So it was one of those moments for me.
I feel this is so relatable for so many people, especially in the creative space, where we might have had a mentor, we might have had someone good next to us, and the moment you have to fly with your own wings, it's like, damn, I don't even know if I have wings, so I might just crash and die. But then you jump off that cliff and it might work out. So I'm very happy that you shared that, because I do receive a lot of messages, because my YouTube channel is all about like photography and like how to get better, or like I'm sharing my own adventures on photography. And a lot of people are like, can you look at my photos? Are they good? What do you think is missing? I feel like I don't have this. I feel basically people in general don't feel confidence enough in their own work, or need external validation. And it's not a bad thing. It's totally in a way I would say it's totally normal. But being able to have that experience that you had, where you get in a, let's call it bad situation, not bad situation, but not ideal, and you come out like stronger with the good outcome, it's awesome.
For sure. No, I love that. And that's, I think, one of my favorite videos that I've made has this quote in there where I say, I want to be constantly practicing courage. And that's just something in the last few years that I've...
This is so hard.
It's so hard, but it's so good. It's so good when you lean into that.
Yeah. I want to dig into that, because, okay, tell me what, first, you have what, almost 900,000 people following you on Instagram. So just to give context to people, and there is one thing, I don't know if I told you, maybe I told you in the past, but there is one thing, me and I think my wife introduced me to your account the first time, that we always felt with you, is a sense of authenticity, especially maybe when it shifted less from your like just small work that was there, or like shoots, to like whatever you want to call it nowadays, where it's like more of you. I don't know how to call that, but where it's more of you. And there was always that sense of authenticity, and I would say that your caption, you always put a lot of effort into them. Can you tell us, because even me personally, it's just like, let's not try to say other people, I struggle sharing my own story. I struggle sharing my struggle, because sometimes I might not even recognize them, in a way where it's like I just either get over them or I try to dismiss it. How did you come to share everything on your social media, where you're more open, and did you have a huge blockage, or was it, how was it? Any tips?
Well, I think for me, it was about right around, maybe, I don't know, 2-3 years ago now. I don't remember even the exact timeline, but yeah, it was kind of that shift that you were talking about, where it went from just kind of like, these are my adventures, or these are my shoots, or my travels, to I just felt like quite burnt out internally with that whole process. And I wasn't like excited to, be on social media, and it kind of just was in this like weird funk with it. And I just realized that it was kind of because I was putting myself in this little box where I was trying to be so, just like outdoor adventure, and that was my brand, that it wasn't really feeling like a reflection of who I really was. And that, I think, because I got into this all pretty much by accident, one of the blessings of that is I don't really know how to do it any other way. I didn't really ever think of it initially as a business. It was just like, oh, this is just me. And so I've tried to keep that as a through line through everything, where if someone knows me in real life and they know me online, like those two things are pretty close to like who I am as a person. So yeah, I decided at that point that I was like, the only way for me to be excited about this, or the only way for me to like continue this in just a way that feels good and sustainable to me, is to be able to be completely myself. And I'm naturally just a very open person. I love connection. I think part of that is because I grew up being really, really shy and not knowing how to connect with people, and not feeling a sense of belonging or community. And so now that I've cultivated more of those skills, it's just like the most beautiful thing in the world to feel connected to people, and to feel seen, and to make other people feel seen. So yeah, I think at that point I just decided like, hey, I'm just gonna really be open about everything, and you know, I just want to share things that I'm learning, things that I'm struggling with, and not feel like I need to create this persona that's like, oh, look at her, she's always traveling and always living this amazing life, you know, which is cool, and like that's great. But I was just like, no, like I just like there has to be more of a purpose behind it. And I think with anything, no matter how fun it is, no matter how much money you're making with it, no matter what, like if you're not connecting to like some purpose, like sense of purpose behind it, it's just going to start feeling draining. And so that's, I think that's kind of that point that I hit, and I realized like, oh, I really want people to leave my page feeling like really deeply empowered to strive for things in their life in this completely messy, imperfect process. And the only way for people to walk away feeling that way is for me to be thoughtful in what I'm sharing, and to share that part of my process and to share part of that journey with them when things are brilliant and vibrant and amazing, and when I'm just starting out and I'm shaking and scared and you know, and not as much knowing what I'm doing. And I think once I started down that path, it became so clear to me how universal those feelings and emotions are. And it's become one of my favorite, just like touch points, I guess, with people, is to just be that reminder for them that, like, you know, like we said, to like be practicing that, that courage, and to just show up in the world as your most authentic self, because that is really, you know, your singular gift to the world.
That's that's a great like piece of advice right there that I will try to integrate. Definitely, I highly suggest anyone, especially if they're trying to connect with others, if they're just trying to share for sharing or for their personal embellishment, then we can't do much for them. But if you're trying to connect with other people, I think that's amazing.
Yeah, and I mean, social media is like a really interesting little little beastie where I think a lot of it is we come, you know, to social media for a few reasons, but I think one of them is for entertainment, which is totally valid. We all love to be entertained. And I think one of them is for this like sense of connection. And so when people are just trying to share, you know, purely like photos, I think there's just such an overabundance of like beautiful things that don't really have any depth to them, that it's going to be
Yeah,
really hard.
especially
Yeah, especially
nowadays.
nowadays. Like, I mean, everyone has access to like, or I mean, most people have access to just such incredible levels of equipment and knowledge and you know, all those things, that it is going to be very hard, I think, to stand out as a person or as an account or whatever that is, as a business, if your sole strategy is just to like take really pretty pictures, or make really pretty videos or something, because that's kind of like only going to go so far, and you have so much competition in that, versus when you're sharing your unique voice or unique struggles or whatever that is, you're automatically like almost removing yourself from the competition because there's only you, you know?
Did you feel that there was maybe an increase of engagement, but a decrease of likability? When I say likability, is likability of a post when you do those, but you know you have deeper connection with the people. I'm kind of curious.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I think there is definitely, so I have essentially sacrificed like growing really quickly, or you know, having higher engagement possibly, or just different things in that sphere, because I have opted for like other values of quality and things like that. So
Mhm.
yeah, the way that I share, it's just like you mentioned, it just takes so much more time, to kind of go into my own thoughts and to digest those lessons, and then to put it in a format that's maybe applicable to other people and that they can learn from as well. And so that I wouldn't say, I don't know, you can never know like what my engagement or whatever would have been or would be.
Yeah.
But I think that in general, yeah, perhaps I haven't scaled as quickly, but I feel a much deeper sense of connection to the audience that I do have. And I feel that they really, really get me. And I've always been more about, how can I serve serve really well the smallest viable audience versus just like, I want to grow, I want to grow, I want to grow, because I know that there's tactics for that. And I just decided that that was not like what was important to me, basically.
Well, kudos to you for that, because I think it's awesome. I will say there is you and Chris Burke have been two really, really deep examples in my social media journey of keeping engaged with your audience. And one of the reasons is that I can't remember at what size I started following and discovering your work, but it was probably during our world tour in 2017, I would say. And I remember that seeing your stuff, and my wife was like, look, that's like a supermodel doing outdoor stuff. It's really fun, and it looks also very real. And I was like, oh yeah, that's true. And Chris Burke, I've been following him for a very long time, but I remember he does reply to comments. Then one day I even DM'd me, I dared, and the guy even replied, and my question was probably very annoying at the time, because it was around gear, and nowadays I'm like, oh, another gear question. But I was that guy at one point. And I remember even when I DM'd you, I wasn't really expecting anything, and you did reply to comments, you did reply, and I was like, wow, no matter how big, you guys reply. Even Gary replies to random comments, and I'm like, that's a good example that I want to foster for my own community, versus some people I know or friends like you might be commenting 5 times, or like you DM them and they see things, but then just never like take the time to reply. And it always makes me wonder, why are you here? Like, what are you trying to share? What do you want to share so much if you don't want to connect?
Yeah. And I think different people also have like just different personalities. And I think Chris and I share that sense of just like love for humanity. Chris is awesome, by the way. He's just such a good human with like boundless energy, it feels like.
He's still my number one podcast so far.
Oh, that's so awesome. Yeah, he's a fantastic human. But I think we're both very blessed in the sense that, yeah, we're very energized by community, and we're very energized by that interaction. And like, I just know I have some friends that are so deeply creative, but like aren't very good with people, and that's like, it's just like, I do feel for them in a certain way, because, like they'll get DMs and it's really overwhelming for them. And it is overwhelming for me too. But I think I just see it as such such a like a privilege, I guess, to connect with people in that way. And then it also comes down a little bit to context of like, I have no idea what our first interaction was, but generally I'm responding to people who are saying something either like really meaningful, or are asking a question that they really don't have access to in any other format. So if it's just something that they could easily Google, like I'm personally, just because I do have limited time, I'm not going to respond to those ones, because I'm like, you're kind of just being a little lazy. Versus if it is something very much that I could be of service and help them with, then I'll try to take the time and like answer that. So yeah.
That's awesome. I just checked. First interaction was May 2018. First real interaction is after I mentioned you in the story, actually, in October 2018. And then you were just like, oh, thank you, etc. And that opened the discussion in the DM world. And that happens a lot with me also, where like people send me stuff and I'm like, cool, I read it and that's it. And then something a little bit more meaningful comes out, and I'm like, oh, actually, you know what? That you took the time to write more than great.
Yeah.
So let me take the time to reply more than great too.
Yeah, it's all just an exchange of energy, right? You just want that to feel like, you just want that to feel like good and in alignment with like what someone's putting out there. So if someone sends me like this thing about how I'm like, you know, like an example for their daughter and that she started doing her own beach cleanups and all this stuff, I'm not just gonna be like, oh, great, thumbs up. You know, it's like, it just doesn't feel good. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the creative photography side and maybe a little bit video. Where do you feel like you're at in your photography? Do you feel like 100% empowered and kind of like, where do you stand? Do you shoot everything yourself, or are you working on? Actually, sorry, let's start again. I have the first question. I'm super curious. When you go out with photographers, let's say, and you yourself, you edit your photos, you all even take your own photos, etc. But do you take their raw images and edit it yourselves? Do you wait for them to do it and send it to you? What's your philosophy?
Yeah, so for me, I do take all the raws, or a lot of times people are also shooting on my camera too, but for every photographer that I work with, I take the raws. We like double back. Like I'll take one copy, they'll take one copy, obviously, and then I'll edit them and etc. That being said, as a caveat, that is very, very, very rare for the creative industry in some ways. Especially if someone is more trained as like classically as a photographer versus just like a social media personality. And so like I just don't want people to go out expecting that of photographers, because I don't think that that's by any means the rule of thumb. I tend to shoot with the same kind of like group of people a lot, and we've built a rapport and a trust, and they know that like I'm very respectful of the right, like that I have those images, and that also it's just like I am running like a business as well, and I can't be like waiting for someone to send me photos or to be like editing it in their style, whereas like I'm just very, very particular about how I edit, and you know, I want that to like be reflected. And so yeah, in general, that's the way that I work, is I am taking and keeping all the raws.
That's good to hear, and it's nice that you explained that you build a rapport with those photographers. I do have to say, the first few times, or even other like creative friends, and we're like on trip, and they're like, "Hey, can you give me the raws?" Part of my photographer, maybe it's because I used to work with like private clients and stuff, and you would never give them raws.
Yeah.
Always feels like I'm giving a little piece of my soul. I'm like, please don't put a fake rainbow in my photo.
No, 100%. And I think that's something that if you are starting out on this journey, or, you know, as like, I'm someone who's kind of seen both sides of being behind the camera and in front of the camera as talent. I just think that whatever you are and however you are contributing to that creative vision, it's like really nice to kind of like have some of those things discussed ahead of time, even if, or to just after the fact, like check in with people and just make sure you're on the same page. Cause I definitely had growing pains with that, and with not, you know, being on the same page with someone and having them feel offended or me feel offended, or all those, you know, all those things have definitely happened in so many different forms. So yeah, it's like, I totally feel and know what you mean with that, but it all comes down to communication.
Yeah, definitely. And also, if you can trust, like if we were to shoot together, I know your feed, I know how you edit, I'd be happy giving you the raws. Some people I will be like iffy because I just don't like it, right? And I just don't like the end result. And it's like you're giving something that you like, that you created, and then someone makes it ugly to your own eyes, and then you're like, oh, damn it.
Yeah.
But if that person, if you have rapport and you like the style and everything, that's good. I really like that. What do you shoot with, and like what's your gear go to right now?
So my gear go to is the Canon 5D Mark IV. I've recently been just so in love with the 50 1.2. I shoot, I'd say like a good portion of my photos on that lens. It's just so beautiful. And I think when I was more in like just shooting landscapes and stuff, obviously the 16-35 is an amazing lens and just great for all around kind of stuff. but I've been really digging the 50. And then I have quite a lot of other gear. I think I have 3 other cameras, but I would say 97% of my images are from the 5D. And then for my drone, I still really like the Mavic Air, which feels like kind of sellouty to say because I was in the Mavic Air commercial. But for me, and just the fact that I don't do a lot of like, you know, a lot of drone work, that one's just super portable for me to bring on hikes and stuff, and weight's like always a big just like issue for me, being a smaller girl and human being. But yeah, so that's kind of like, I'd say like my minimal kit would be those 2 lenses, my 5D body, and the Air, and it's kind of like ultra minimal.
Have you tried the EOS R yet?
The what? USR?
The
Oh
EOS
no, I
R,
haven't.
yeah, the mirrorless.
Your accent, I
No?
was like, the what? The USR? It's so good. No, I haven't actually. Have you tried it?
Yeah, I did once. It's it has a very good grip,
Oh, that's
but it's much smaller. I mean, it's a good amount smaller than the 5D Mark IV and lighter, which I think wins.
yeah. I mean, I think mirrorless is kind of the future. I can't really see it going another direction. To me, it just makes more sense. But yeah, I did shoot a campaign for Canon last year, I guess that was, using a different mirrorless, the M50 that they have. And oh my gosh, it was like a revelation traveling with that thing. I was like, it's like I have
Really?
nothing in my backpack, because I mean, yeah, the 5D is like, it's you know,
It's
it's
huge.
hefty.
Yeah.
It has some weight behind it, which feels nice sometimes. And I think, yeah, I feel like very like, look at my camera, I got this. But yeah,
I'm the pro.
but traveling with the M50 and shooting that, and I think I was maybe like, yeah, like it was quite a few months where I was pretty much just always opting to like only bring that camera, to just make myself shoot with it and be able to give better images and feedback for that campaign, but also because I really genuinely enjoyed it. And I still to this day recommend it to a lot of people if they're kind of more like, have a beginner's interest or just amateur interest in photography. It is just such a fun camera to use. And I had a lens that was an 18 to 150. And I was like, oh my gosh, I never even have to change lenses. This is amazing.
That's amazing. A lot of people overestimate how much of an impact the camera will make. And having a smaller footprint is more important.
100%. Yeah. I mean, that was definitely one thing looking back that I wish I knew, is like, just, it's really, I don't want to say it's not, but it's really not about the equipment. It's like, it's 100% the ability to like tell a story or evoke an emotion or, so many other things. But the gear helps obviously, but it's not the full thing.
Yeah. I felt it's funny, the higher level, let's call it, the photographers or the videographers I've interviewed, the less they're able to speak about gear and the more to just talk about story and how they want to tell like stories of those people, or like that crazy story of like empowering that thing and that thing. And I just found it interesting because I mean, I love gear, but more and more I distance myself from it in the sense where it's fun, but I want to share something that's a little bit deeper, or actually the most of my work, I want to spend it in deeper things versus just worrying or thinking about the gear. And it's an interesting discussion to talk to like really famous people in that world, and they barely know what they're using.
Yeah, that's such an interesting like lesson to glean from having all those conversations, because obviously I only know my experience. But yeah, I mean, I have, like I said, like 3 other cameras sitting back here, and just I have an entire gear closet that I'm so grateful and so blessed to have. And over the years, I think I've just pared down and used less even than I used to. And once you kind of find the system or find the things that work it's, yeah, you do get a little bit more divorced from that like gear excitement. And you're just like, oh, I just need tools. Like I need the tools to tell this story. And if that means I need a gimbal stabilizer, then cool. But if I don't, then I'm not going to use it. I'm not going to bring it, you know? Whereas I used to just get so excited about like, I want to have all the bells and whistles and all the things, and I need all the things. So yeah, it's funny.
Well, I feel like in a way it's like life, you know, you try everything. When you're a kid, every sport possible. I don't know, that was my life, but you try everything, like every kind of sport. One day you want to be a karate champion. The next day you want to try kung fu. After it's mountain biking. And as you grow older, you start like honing down into just a few.
For sure. I mean, I feel like I've been slightly opposite in the sense of, or actually, I guess I've always just, I carried that love of finding new hobbies for sure with me from childhood until now. Because I feel like every year I'm just like, oh, I'm going to try this hobby. I'm going to do this one now too. But I totally get what you mean. Yeah. With other aspects of my life, it's been a process of simplification and finding what works and just kind of moving forward.
Did you, on that note, were you always into the outdoors or like adventurous stuff, or is it something that came up later?
So I was always into the outdoors. My parents are both like very active outdoor kind of people, especially my mom. And so she had me hiking from when I was like really, really, really little. But it's funny, like all the things that people know of me now, like freediving, slacklining, acro, highlining, backpacking, like all those things, surfing even, I didn't start until, you know, in this last few years or in this last maybe like decade of my life. There weren't anything that I was doing growing up. So yeah, I always had that like outdoor tendency, but the way it's come together now is like, is very new to me.
So that's awesome. So those are things that can grow and like you can develop later on. It's interesting.
100%. Yeah. I'm such a big advocate for like, it is literally never like ever too late to learn something new. And I know that's like so cheesy, but I really feel that like to my core, that it's so true. And like my mom is 64 now, maybe even 65. Gosh, I should know this, but she horseback rides, and she's just getting into like barrel racing, and she just has this horse that she
barrel
yeah, it's
racing?
kind of like a
What
form
is that?
of it's like an event in rodeo where there's 3 barrels set up, and you do it for time, where you have to go as fast as you can without hitting the barrel down. And yeah, there's like different events that you can do basically on horseback.
Okay. I was like, oh, did your mom go? Because there's like, I've seen those, like people put themselves into a barrel and just go down a hill. I'm like, that sounds really extreme.
That would be hilarious. Oh my gosh. I just had such a great visual of my mother with her blonde hair streaming in the wind going down some like gnarly ravine in a barrel. Oh gosh. Yes. I love it.
So not
that one. She's not that adventurous. She's pretty adventurous, but yeah. But yeah, all these things like I've learned. It's like, I mean, acro I've learned in the past year, and that's like I'm so happy that I started sharing that journey when I kind of like sucked at it, and highlining the same thing. Like the first video I posted of it was me crying. And just to show that like in a year and 2 years, like you can make immense, you know, progress and strides forward in these things.
Yeah, it's something. I mean, slackline you just mentioned is that weird thing where you look at someone walk on it and you're like, oh, cool, let me try, and you think you will be able at least to stand on it, and then you start shaking and fall, and you're like, how is that even that difficult? Like, what happened here?
Totally, that's like my favorite thing is when the first time people get on the line and like. I specifically say like, okay, you have to try it at least once on your own, because like, I want you to know what it feels like. And everyone will just get this look of like, absolute horror. Like, what is my leg doing? Why am I shaking like this? And I'm like, no, you don't get it. Like, everyone is like this, and it's so awesome. And then, yeah, you have that whole like arc where you're like, this is impossible. This is impossible. This sport is really stupid. I don't know why anyone does this. Like, wait. I think I just took one step. And then you're like, oh my God, I'm so hooked. This is so much fun.
Yeah, that's basically the learning curve summarized. That's true. That's amazing. I love how you're sharing and advocating for the outdoors. I've been surrounded in my life with both a lot of outdoors when I was a kid. Not the great outdoors, but my parents like would make sure that we always go in the forest or we go in the mountains or go skiing or whatever whenever possible. We've been very blessed to have those opportunities. And it has a big impact on me now. So when I spend too much time in the city, I go crazy. Mm-hmm. But I also have friends that they also define themselves as like, oh no, I'm more of a city person. And in my head, I'm like, can't that change? And that's always what I'm like, what do I have to do to show those people how fun it can be to do those things?
Yeah, I mean, it's like to each their own, but definitely I feel you in like just in my heart and soul. I mean, I'm sitting here looking at a tree right now because like just nature and the outdoors make me so freaking joyful. And it's like I couldn't even fathom a life where I couldn't be connected to nature in so many different ways, shapes and forms, and to the ocean. And I'm like you, where I get like really grouchy if I haven't been underwater in a certain amount of time, and I try not to be, but I'm like, I just feel weird. I just don't feel good, and I don't know why. And I'm like, oh, I just need to go swimming. Like, it's fine, so but
well, I'm gonna be vulnerable for that one. My YouTube channel has been like around photography and stuff, but lately it's been a lot around city and street photography, and I love it. But I have that fear at the back of my mind that I'm building an audience a lot around that, and I cannot switch it, or I cannot lean too much into what I also really love, which is outdoors and shooting underwater or whatever. And it's interesting because it allows me to have the life I have right now, which is good. But part of me also wants to connect back to nature a little bit more. And I just love shooting on the water. I'm in Chicago right now, so the lake is kind of freezing, but the water is clear blue turquoise, right? It's weird. So when I looked at it the other day, I was like, oh my God. And I was like, I need to find a friend who is ready to go with me in the water. So I want to go shoot underwater in Chicago, and I have to find a model or someone who's ready to be in the water with me. That's going to be very difficult, but because it's like freezing water. But I'm like, I really want to do that, and part of me is just afraid that as I go forward, if I do too much of one thing, then I cannot. At least with the social media, I think it's going to be more difficult to showcase other areas.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely know a lot of my friends that are in this, or have very successful, social media businesses or online presence, and they feel like a little trapped by the work that they've put out in the past, and that they can't pivot into a way that would feel really good to them. And and that's just really hard. It's a conversation I've listened to for so many people. And is there a reason that like you just have a great interest or wider audience when you do those like street photography classes? Or I'm just like curious what the impetus is behind sharing that versus sharing like landscape photography.
Mostly because I don't have access to the nature as much as I want to, or I'm not in a position. We just got a baby in November,
so
congratulations. Thank you. I'm not like it's been really intense. If you ever think of one, like prepare. But I'm just joking. No, actually, it's true. But it's just easy for me to do it. Right? It's somewhere like I feel like cities, at least for me, is like places where I always like find other people. I can connect easily with like friends. I don't have the circle that is like very outdoorsy.
Mm.
I haven't been able to build that circle, and that's also why I reach out to people like you, and I have them on the podcast, etc. So selfishly, at the back of my mind, I'm also trying to build that tribe where I can actually get inspired by, and that is not necessarily in what I'm doing every day here. So that's my selfish answer.
Well, that's the best, is when we like, what is it? When we scratch our own itch, right? That's what like Tim Ferriss always advocates for, is like doing things that are a little bit selfish in that way, because it's knowledge that you want to have or something. And I'm also going to hold you accountable to doing that photo shoot in the lake, because that would be so wild and so cool. My friends actually live in Chicago, and they took this crazy drone shot when the lake had been frozen over, but then kind of like it was starting to break up, and they basically took a drone shot of paddleboarding the lake with all these like kind of like icebergs, I guess. And it was so cool, and you just never would have even guessed it was in Chicago, you know, and people were blown away.
I might have to ask you to put me in touch with your friend if they're ready to go into the water.
Yeah, I can put you in touch. I think one of them's now living in California, but yeah, let's connect afterwards about that.
We'll find it. I know there are people surfing in Lake Michigan in the winter, so I will find someone. I will be accountable for it and do it anyway. Otherwise, it's one of those things that if I don't do it, I'd probably be like, why am I living for?
Exactly. Do it. I think we all have so many beautiful ideas, and I just want people to, like myself included, to just like take those actionable steps, just like doing the things and getting them done. And it's such a reward in and of itself, just to like have a creative goal and to execute it. And I think that's one of like my favorite feelings.
Do you have a 2020 theme or thing you want to lean into?
Ooh, this is a really good question. There are a few things that I've kind of told myself that I want to be better at, but I don't think that that's so much your question. I think my theme for this year is realizing that at the core of what I do, more than travel, more than adventure, more than anything else, is I love creating communities, and I love enabling people that feel like they don't have that to connect like to other people, and to feel that sense of belonging and stuff. And I think that that's something that I'm really going to lean into this year. I just finished recording a little video for a retreat that I'm about to launch with a girlfriend, and I'm super excited about that, to kind of be able to cultivate more in-person experiences. And it's the same reason that I'm taking 3 weeks off and paying to do an acro yoga teacher training, is because I want to be able to like take that knowledge back and teach it to my community here in Hawaii, and then also hopefully with other people around the world. So yeah, just kind of like serving that idea is going to be, I think, what leads me through this year.
That's amazing. Well, I think you're gonna do really well at that, and I'm excited to see where it goes. Do you have? I'm gonna be super mindful with your time, but do you have anything that helps you creatively, like a go-to whenever you're like a little bit stuck, or you need new ideas, or you're like, I feel like I'm doing too much of the same thing? Where does your mind go? What do you do to like can find something new?
That's great. I think for me, so like when I'm feeling kind of burnt out, is that like?
Yeah, either you're burnt out, or I guess it's a form of burnt out, or you might not be burnt out, but you're like a little stuck. You're like, I don't want to do that thing again. I want to find new ideas. What do you go?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I've always just approached it with the idea of like, I'm gonna like, I don't know, like shoot things that I'm excited about. And I know sometimes, yeah, you can like find that excitement a little bit like lacking. And I think one of the one of like the really conversely fun things that I've enjoyed doing is shooting in just radically different environments than I normally would, because I think I did get to a point where I was like, all right, here's a waterfall. I'm going to stand here. This is going to do like this. It's the perfect rule of thirds. Awesome. Cool. Check. Next. That looks great.
Sorry, I have
You
to
know,
laugh.
and it is really, in a very strange way, with, with these beautiful mountain landscapes or beautiful everything, it starts to kind of look the same objectively. I still maintain like such a deep appreciation for nature, but just objectively, you're kind of, scrolling through all your images, you're like, everything kind of looks the same. And so one thing that I've been trying to do, and I've really implemented in this last year, was just the idea that you can make art anywhere. And so like, even when conditions aren't good, I'll be like, well, okay, well, what could I do that would like make this cool? Or what, like, prop could I introduce that would make this more interesting? And it kind of like enlivens the process for me. And I'm actually been just like pretty baffled at the results, that like some of my favorite images have come from like these weird experiences and weird places, and, things that I never would have been like, oh, I'm going to plan a trip around, shooting at a truck stop in Louisiana. You just don't like, you don't do these things. But yeah, it's just really been tuning more into that idea of like, oh, how can I like make this thing more unique, or how can I contribute like more of like my thoughts and personality to this process, versus just like showing up to a location and snapping a picture kind of a thing. Whether that is implementing more of a narrative or more of an emotion, going back to storytelling as always, what's that meaning behind it? Or is it just, like going on this road trip that I went on from Florida to Texas. And it was like pretty random a lot of the times, but every day I was just kind of like, all right, it's super rainy out, it's super cold. A lot of the locations we wanted to go to, we're not going to get to go to. How can I still like flex my creativity muscles every day? So it was like one day I was like, oh, you interviewed Quinn on this podcast, right? Oh, man.
Yeah, he's the last one of 2019, and you will be the first one of 2020.
That's awesome. Oh my gosh, so perfect. So yeah, that was like a really good example, is going with Quinn, and I, we have really different approaches on photography and stuff, and I think it kind of blew his mind, some of the things that I wanted to shoot. He was like, you want to shoot what? But he was so game, and it was so much fun. And so like one day we went to a thrift store, and got like, just looked through like what kind of different, things that we could get as like props for this location that we were going to. And really that made the shoot so much fun for me, was, I found this like vintage suitcase, and that became like a central part of the shoot, and like the driving force of the shoot, versus just like showing up to this tree tunnel that's sort of like everyone's already shot, and just kind of like doing the same thing. It was just like, what's that little 5% extra that I can put in that will, even if it's just to make me feel more excited about the process.
That's really interesting. That suitcase photo, for everyone, you can just see it on Instagram. I remember seeing it. I thought it was really cool. And now that we talk about it again, reminds me of Walter Mitty, the movie, or with the accent. I don't know how it is with the right
Walter
accent.
Mitty. Yes.
Correct. Yes. And I think I remember like the poster has a guy with a suitcase that's completely out of place compared to the environment. And your shot, now I think about it, like kind of links that. I'm not saying it looks like it. It's just links those parts, which is kind of funny how the mind works. But I love what you're saying. Do you have an example of something that you would do on a rainy day if you were home, or something you did where you're like really impressed by the result?
I think on that same trip, one that we did was, I actually like, I made where I was impressed with the result. Okay, this one was a complete failure, so I guess I'm not going to talk about that one. But it was really fun to shoot. I made a shirt out of leaves.
No. Please talk about it.
well, yeah, one of the days I was like really inspired by all the foliage and stuff around. It was kind of like the end of fall at that point when we were taking the road trip. And so I was like, oh, hey, can we just like pull over and find a bunch of really cool leaves? And you know, as we're driving, I spent like an hour taping the leaves all to my like upper body and face. And yeah, we just took like a bunch of like leaf portraits. We found a truck stop. I think it was in Alabama, but it had this really cool yellow tree out front that like all the leaves had fallen down. So it's like 40 degrees. Or, you know, that's in Fahrenheit. So that's probably just above 0 in Celsius. And I'm like laying in the front yard of this truck stop with all these leaves covering me. And it was just so much fun to shoot and to like figure out different, you know, things with like the contrast of the leaves and the shapes and my body or different things. So yeah, that was super fun. I didn't end up even like really doing anything with the photos, but it was just something that was like such a fun thing to do on a rainy day. And I think it's like you can try just like being so willing to try to experiment with and like be really actually like purposeful in trying different things. So don't like, it's so easy for me to go out and shoot like really clear underwater, you know, images or whatnot with like beautiful, just like sand and things. But probably my favorite underwater image that I've been part of lately is on that same trip. It was like in the swamps in Florida. It was super, super murky. Like literally like a few feet of visibility. We had gone there to actually shoot photos with manatees, and then kind of didn't know that there's certain rules that they don't really want you diving down with the manatees. You can kind of like, I guess, hang out near them and snorkel, but they don't want you like diving down. And there were just like not really many manatees around anyway. So we were like, you know, a lot of people would be like, oh, that was a bust. Like we didn't get anything. We didn't, you know, whatever. But I sort of asked Josiah, another photographer friend who was with me, like, hey, like, you know, do you think we could just like, let's just like try to shoot something right here? And he's like, I don't know, the clarity is really bad. I'm like, yeah, I know. But he was, you know, he was game for it. And he kind of looked and he was like, oh, you know, this grass is kind of cool. It's kind of a cool texture. And we're like, yeah, you know, I mean, it was the only thing around was this grass, this like textured seagrass. But we ended up taking these very like dreamy, kind of surreal underwater images that we only got one usable frame because there was like stuff floating in the water. There were bubbles. There were just, I mean, yeah, the clarity was not ideal, but it's one of my favorite images. And that purely came out of like a curiosity and a willingness to like experiment in these conditions that like were very not ideal in a lot of ways.
It's like trying when it's not ideal is the best way to succeed at something that you haven't expected.
Exactly. And I think in all these lessons, a big thing for me has just been like the people I surround myself with, because it can get, you know, a little like I don't know, yeah, just tiring if you feel like you're doing the same thing over and over. And I've just been super grateful to have people that are like so down to like just try these weird different ideas. And then also on the flip side, taking time to just go shoot solo and throw on a, you know, like I have like a lens that's a 150 to 600, and I had never used it really. And it was you know, for the things I'm shooting, like realistically, like, what am I going to use that for a lot of times? And I just went out one super rainy afternoon by myself and was like, oh, you know what? I'm going to shoot these waves and this is kind of cool. And then I got so excited in this process that I literally, I like was running around so much that everything fell out of my pockets and I had to go like collect them on the beach later. Cause I was like, wow, photography is fun again, you know? So I know everyone does get burnt out, or sometimes we feel like we're shooting the same things, but if you can either like lean on the people around you or, you know, just radically change something up, that's your lens or the environment or whatever it is, and just know that like that spark will come back.
That is the best advice. It happened to me yesterday with the snow. So
yeah, you were so excited. I love that.
I just ran out, and that's gonna be actually a video for me on YouTube. And whether it does well or not, I don't really care. But the excitement will definitely shine through, I think, in the video. Uh, and it's good to reconnect and just try things that might not work, or just do them not because you think it's gonna look good, but just because you want to have fun. And I think with photography, especially, maybe nowadays more than back in the days, because we have so many examples of great photos, like we're inundated with like good stuff, it makes you feel like you cannot take, you should not take a bad photo, or you should not share anything that is not perfect or visually appealing. But in actuality, this is the fun part for me, at least.
100%. Yeah. And I mean, I think I only share, 0.01% of the photos that I take. And so many of them are just for the joy, or for figuring things out, or that they just didn't work, or it was just a learning experience. But yeah, we have so many examples of great photos, and of, landscapes of beautiful things, that I think it does get really easy to kind of like fall into that thing of feeling like that should be your style, or that is something that you should kind of like replicate or do the same thing as. And yeah, I would just like, I follow a lot of like weird, like kind of just like very artsy accounts that don't even really shoot like quote unquote like the Instagram style, because I find more inspiration from that, and from paintings, and from, just books, or whatever it is, that that I actually get like so much more inspiration from people that are doing things that are a little weird and a little different.
Yeah, if I'm correct, Sorella
Yes,
more. I think you guys spent time
I love her.
together, and yeah, I remember I messaged and discovered her like before she blew up on YouTube, just before that, like 3 days before she blew up, and after I never got to meet her. But I remember we were both in Bali, and I started seeing her accounts and what she was doing, and I was like, wow, that's, in a way that was different, because it reminded me a lot more to what I would used to look at in the fashion world, or like when I wanted inspiration for shooting with client, where it was very edgy, or just like very artistic in a way. I use that word because I don't know how to define it. But and I remember she really leans into it, whether or not it's Instagrammable, or whether or not like people like it. It doesn't. I feel like she's a little bold with her photography, which is really refreshing for the social media um, environment that I evolve in. I'm sure there's another. Again, it's just like everything. I'm sure there is another scene that is all about it, but in the one that I evolve, I don't see that much. So I think it's great.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, we're so like, in a sense, like siloed these days, because yeah, you like a certain thing, and then the algorithm will give you more of that and give you more of that, until the point that you're kind of like just trapped by your own things that you like, and it's hard to get kind of a fresh perspective or get out of that. And yeah, that's one thing I've always just so admired about her and been really inspired by is, when I'm shooting around her or something, just the fact that just the way her approach to photography is it was so radically different than mine. And she, sees like an old dock with some textures, and she's like, oh, this is great. This is amazing. I'm like, really? I don't see anything, and she's, it's cool to see what inspires different people. And I think that's been such a amazing blessing in my life and in my career, is having access to so many different people and so many different, kind of genres of photography that are, kind of more purely landscape, or more commercial, or, self-portraiture and fashion. And it's just neat. It kind of reminds me of, I went on this hike with a guy he specializes in harvesting wild, like wild flowers and wild, like leaves and things to make into like perfumes and hydrosols. And this is like a little bit of a weird tangent, but it's going to come full circle. And we went on this hike that to me, I'm not lying, it was like visually the least interesting hike of my life. But it was so fascinating to be with him, because he is over there like telling me about the three different kinds of sage, and then the smell of this dirt, and why this berry is this way because of this bird. And it just, the nuance that he saw in that environment was like looking at this place with a completely different set of eyes. And you notice things that I wouldn't have ever noticed, you know, purely through someone else's perception of this thing or of this place. And I've always tried to like remember that when I'm in a place where I'm like, oh, there's no angles, or the light sucks, or there's no, you know, good photos to be had here. I'm like, no, that's just my perception of the place, because someone else could be here and it would be their heaven, you know. And I try to just kind of channel that and know that there's always something to see or something to discover in that moment.
That's amazing. It's something that is, in a way, it's like you want to change your universe, start by changing your eyes and how you see the universe. Yeah. And it's so true, like in life, but especially like for photography. I started, I think last year, I built a course over 30 days. And it's interesting because the only thing that I thought that I was like, okay, there's all these courses on photography, which is great, you know, but very classic, like, whoa, what does this do? What's this gear? How do you do that? Literally my first week of the class has no camera. Yeah. I'm like, guys, throw your camera away. I don't want to see a phone. I don't want to see anything. I want you to change your eye. And once you change your eye and you're able to perceive all those like nuances in light, the photography, the images that, or the stories that you might see will change drastically. And then and you've seen it, you hang out with someone who's like picking up wildflowers and he sees something different and you're like, wow, interesting. Then you hang out with a photographer who does street and you'll see him look at things very differently than a landscape photographer. But if you're able to change your eyes and pick those nuances, then I think that's when you're able to create better or have more ease in creating, even in boring places.
100%. Yeah. I just resonate with that so much, because it's like, yeah, I never wanted it to be in a place and it's just like, oh, it's just like not worthy or whatever. And it really, photography has made me like just appreciate things either like at the, you know, little like macro level or whatever it is, that there's always something to see and to notice. And then that's kind of translated, I think, in, like you said, just the way that I look at life, and that like every moment can be infinitely beautiful.
If something is not interesting, look closer.
Look closer, look farther, understand more of the story, ask a better question. Like it's all on us, you know. Every person, every place is interesting. It's just, yeah, like what lens are you looking through? So yeah.
That's amazing, Chelsea. I think we can leave people with that, because I think we've been going on for a very long time, and I want to be super mindful with your time. I think it's very interesting. So let's keep sharing. I just want to ask you, where should people find you online, and what do you want to leave them with? Maybe a thought for the weekend or an action?
Oh gosh. So, well, I'll go with the easy one.
Big responsibility. Your weekend presented by Chelsea.
You can find me at Chelsea Kauai. That's Chelsea Kauai on Instagram. That's probably the best place. I also have a private Telegram group where we chat daily about creative struggles and about just like different pain points in our lives and challenges, even outside of creativity, more around mindfulness and self-growth. So there's a link on my in my bio on my Instagram to join in on that, which is kind of like, I'd say the thing I'm most excited about right now is just being able to connect in that way with people. And then, gosh, I mean, we've had 100 minutes of talking and wisdom that we've laid down here. I'm trying to like pull one thing to leave people with, but I don't even know. I would say I just have to go back to my my roots of, I just hope everyone out there listening feels empowered to be constantly practicing courage and know that you can show up in this world and you can create in whatever capacity you desire. So from a small girl on a small island, it is all possible.
Thank you so much, Chelsea. I think that's full circle.
Thanks, Pierre. Have an amazing day.
Wow, thank you so much for listening. I'm very grateful for your time and for Chelsea's time. So please, everyone, go say hi to Chelsea on her Instagram. Leave her a big comment. Tell her what you thought of the podcast. Maybe tag her in your Instagram stories when you're listening. All that. Share the love. I'll see you. Talk to you in the next episode. If you're new here, make sure you subscribe. And voila, have an amazing day. Get out there, go shoot, try something different, try something new.